Zainab grew up in Accra, Ghana with a mind full of ideas and a heart that refused to give up, but almost no one seemed to notice. From the time she was little, she was the girl who asked too many questions, who sketched her thoughts in notebooks, and who dreamed of doing something different. Yet in her house, those dreams never seemed to matter. Her mother had only one picture of success, and that picture was Zainab's older sister, Halima. Halima was everything a parent could brag about: brilliant in school, polished in manners, and adored by teachers and relatives alike. Every achievement of hers was celebrated. Every step she took was framed as perfect. And every time Halima's name came up, Zainab's mother would look at her younger daughter with disappointment and say the words that stung like a wound that never healed. "Why can't you be like Halima?" For Zainab, life became a constant shadow. When Zainab was a child, she tried so hard to be seen. She loved drawing and once spent days making a bright, detailed art project for school. She came home excited, clutching her paper with colors that felt alive. But when she showed it to her mother, the reaction was flat. Instead of praise, her mother sighed and said, "Halima would have done it neater. Why can't you be like Halima?" The paper that Zainab was so proud of suddenly felt worthless. It wasn't just art. At school, Zainab once entered a debate competition. She prepared carefully, practicing late into the night, even standing in front of the mirror to rehearse her words. She didn't win first place, but she came home with a small certificate that meant the world to her. She ran to show it, expecting at least a smile. But her mother barely looked at it. She only reminded her how Halima used to bring home trophies, not just pieces of paper. Each moment like this cut deeper. Zainab wasn't lazy, and she wasn't without talent, but no matter what she did, it seemed invisible next to her sister's shine. The comparisons became a chorus that followed her everywhere: school events, family gatherings, even quiet moments at home. "Why can't you be like Halima?" was the sentence she grew up hearing more than any other. And though it hurt, Zainab began to carry a silent promise in her heart. One day she would prove she was more than enough. As the years went by, Halima's star only grew brighter. She got into one of the best business schools, and as always, the whole family celebrated like she had won a crown. Every phone call, every family gathering, somehow circled back to Halima. Her grades, her plans, her brilliance. When she graduated and opened a company in Lagos, her parents couldn't stop talking about it. They even chipped in money to help her get started, proud to say their daughter was now a businesswoman. At home, conversations turned into mini board meetings. Halima would sit at the table with their father and uncles, discussing investments, strategies, and big opportunities. Zainab, though sitting right there, was invisible. No one asked her opinion, no one cared what she thought. If she tried to join in, her mother would hush her quickly, reminding her that serious things were being discussed. To them, she was still the one who never measured up. It hurt most when relatives visited. They praised Halima endlessly, calling her the pride of the family, while Zainab stood in the background, smiling politely but feeling small. She wasn't jealous of her sister's success. She wanted to be happy for her, but the constant comparisons made it impossible to breathe. She was treated as the mistake, the extra child, the one who didn't fit. And though she stayed quiet, deep down Zainab's resolve hardened. If they thought she was the failure, she would one day prove them all wrong. While her family celebrated Halima's wins, Zainab quietly built a different kind of life. She knew no one would hand her opportunities, so she decided to create her own. In the evenings, after long days of running errands or doing small part-time jobs, she would slip into night classes. She studied tech, business management, and anything that could help her understand the world of work better. Her classmates often complained about being tired, but for Zainab, the exhaustion was worth it. Every lesson felt like a step closer to the life she dreamed of. During the day, she worked wherever she could. Waitressing, tutoring, even helping at small shops. The pay was little, but she saved every coin carefully, writing down expenses in an old notebook. While Halima got family support and admiration, Zainab's efforts went unnoticed. At home, her absence was barely questioned. Her family assumed she was just finding something to do, never realizing she was slowly building skills and discipline. The silence hurt sometimes. There were nights she came home exhausted, her eyes heavy, her body aching, yet no one asked how she was. No one clapped for her small victories or cared about her struggles. But Zainab didn't let that break her. Instead, it fueled her determination. If her family wouldn't see her worth, she would make the world see it. And so, in those quiet nights with her books and her dreams, she began shaping the foundation of her future. Zainab's life began to change the day she joined a small startup in Kumasi. It wasn't glamorous. Just a cramped office with a handful of people sharing old desks and second-hand computers. But to her it felt like a doorway opening. First, she was just grateful to have a chance. She handled basic tasks, fetched files, answered calls, anything they needed. But Zainab was a fast learner, and soon she was paying close attention to how things worked. The startup focused on digital payments, and for the first time she saw how technology could solve real problems for ordinary people. Watching market women and small shop owners struggle with cash, then smile with relief when given simple payment solutions, sparked something inside her. Fintech wasn't just about numbers or apps. It was about changing lives, making things easier and safer for people who had always been left behind. Her bosses noticed how quickly she picked things up. Instead of waiting for instructions, Zainab began suggesting small improvements, simpler designs, smoother processes, ideas to make the system more user-friendly. At first, her co-workers were surprised, but then they realized she had a natural eye for innovation. Even in team meetings, her voice began to carry weight. For the first time in her life, Zainab felt seen, not compared. She wasn't Halima's shadow here. She was Zainab, the girl with fresh ideas. And slowly, she started to believe in something bigger. That she could build something of her own. With the little savings she had and the confidence she built at the startup, Zainab decided it was time to take a bold step. She rented a tiny office space in Kumasi, barely big enough for a desk and a chair, and bought 2 second-hand laptops. That was the birth of her dream, Corpe Solutions. It wasn't flashy, and it definitely wasn't easy, but for Zainab, it felt like planting a seed she had been carrying in her heart for years. When she told her family, their reaction wasn't pride, it was laughter. Her mother scoffed, asking how she expected to compete with real businesses when she could barely afford rent. Halima smirked, calling it a cute hobby, and reminding her that running a company wasn't for everyone. The words stung, but they didn't stop her. If anything, they pushed her harder. Day after day, Zainab poured herself into her little office. She worked on ideas, tested systems, and reached out to small traders who might give her a chance. Sometimes she sat alone for hours, staring at code that wouldn't work or plans that seemed too big for her tiny space. But she kept going. Every doubt, every laugh from her mother, every dismissive look from Halima became fuel. Corpe might have started small, with just 2 laptops and a rented room, but in Zainab's mind it was more than a company. It was proof that she refused to be underestimated any longer. The beginning wasn't the victory Zainab had hoped for. Her first product, a payment app she believed would change the game, didn't take off. Traders found it confusing, customers didn't trust it, and within weeks the small excitement she had built collapsed. To make things worse, the few investors who had shown interest quickly pulled out, claiming her idea was too risky. The little office in Kumasi that once felt full of hope suddenly felt like a cage. There were nights when Zainab sat staring at her laptop, tears rolling down her face, wondering if her mother had been right all along. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this. Maybe she was chasing a dream too big for her. The thought of walking away crossed her mind more than once. But then, like a flame refusing to die, her memories came back. The art projects dismissed, the certificates ignored, the constant echo of, "Why can't you be like Halima?" She remembered the laughter when she first announced Corpe, the mocking smirk on her sister's face. Those insults, once heavy like chains, now lit a fire inside her. She wiped her tears, straightened her back, and told herself failure was not the end. If the first product didn't work, she would build another. If investors left, she would find new ones. Zainab refused to let the story end here. For the first time, her pain wasn't holding her down. It was pushing her forward. Zainab went back to the drawing board with a new focus. Instead of trying to impress big investors right away, she asked herself a simple question. Who really needed her help? The answer was clear: small traders in rural areas, the market women and shopkeepers who struggled with cash every single day. Many of them lost money to theft or couldn't keep proper records. If she could solve their problem, she knew she'd be onto something real. So she poured months into building a new system. Simple, secure, and easy to use. This time she tested it directly with the people she wanted to serve. She sat with traders in crowded markets, watched how they worked, and adjusted the app until even those with little schooling could use it without fear. Slowly, word spread. A few shopkeepers signed up, then a few more, and soon entire markets were buzzing about the new payment solution that actually worked. What started as a trickle became a wave. Small traders loved it, and before long, bigger businesses took notice. Companies that had ignored her before were suddenly calling, asking about partnerships. Zainab's tiny office in Kumasi was no longer quiet. It was alive with activity, with clients walking in and phones ringing non-stop. For the first time, she wasn't just chasing success. She was living it. Corpe Solutions was no longer a dream. It was becoming the tool that connected people, lifted businesses, and proved Zainab's vision was stronger than anyone's doubt. Zainab's success could no longer stay hidden. Local newspapers in Ghana began writing about the young woman in Kumasi who was helping traders move money safely through her digital system. Soon after, Nigerian media picked up the story, calling her a young female innovator to watch. Interviews followed, cameras showed up at her office, and her name started appearing in headlines she had once only dreamed of reading. Awards soon came her way. She stood on stages holding plaques and trophies, smiling as crowds applauded her determination and brilliance. At business forums, she was introduced as the future of African fintech. For once, the world saw her for who she truly was. Not as Halima's little sister, not as the quiet girl in the background, but as Zainab, the visionary who turned failure into strength. But back home, the atmosphere was different. Her family stayed silent. There were no congratulatory calls, no proud hugs, no joyful tears from her mother. At dinner, if someone mentioned Zainab's achievements, her mother quickly changed the subject. Halima pretended not to notice the articles piling up online. It was as if ignoring her success would somehow make it less real. And though the silence stung, Zainab had learned to stand tall without their applause. The recognition she longed for as a child was now coming from the world, and that was more than enough. Deep down, though, she couldn't help but think. One day, even her family would have no choice but to face the truth. While Zainab's star kept rising, Halima's company in Lagos began to crack. At first, it was whispers, late payments to suppliers, unhappy clients, deals that didn't go as planned. Soon the problems grew louder. Her staff complained about poor management, and profits started slipping month after month. The polished image Halima had built was no longer holding together. Instead of fixing the issues, Halima brushed them aside. She had grown too used to being the perfect one, too confident that everything she touched would turn to gold. Money was spent carelessly, decisions were made without proper planning, and slowly, the empire she had built began to crumble. Investors pulled out, clients looked elsewhere, and her once celebrated office turned tense and uncertain. At home, however, Halima and her mother refused to see the truth. Whenever the subject came up, they blamed the market or bad luck. To them, the world was at fault, never their own arrogance or mistakes. Her mother comforted her, saying these were just temporary setbacks, nothing more. But outside their home, people saw it clearly. The once shining daughter of the family was struggling, while the sister they had underestimated was soaring. The contrast couldn't be ignored for long. Still, Halima clung to her pride, unwilling to admit that maybe, just maybe, the sister she had mocked was the one who had figured out the future better than she ever did. Zainab's office was no longer the tiny space it once was. Corpe Solutions had grown fast, and now big investors were knocking on her door, eager to fund her expansion. Meetings were filled with discussions about opening branches across West Africa, scaling up her technology, and reaching millions more people. For Zainab, it felt surreal. Everything she had once begged for in silence was now right in front of her. In one of those meetings, while reviewing potential acquisitions, a familiar name appeared on the list: Halima's company. Zainab paused, almost unable to believe it. The same business that had been celebrated at family dinners, the same company her mother used to brag about endlessly, was now struggling so badly it was up for sale. The room went quiet for her, though the investors kept talking about numbers and opportunities. To them, it was just another company on the market. But to Zainab, it was something far deeper. It was irony at its sharpest. Her sister's empire, once untouchable, was now within her reach. She didn't laugh, though part of her wanted to. Instead, she sat calmly, listening carefully, her mind already turning. The little girl who once cried over being compared had grown into the woman now sitting at the table, holding power her family never believed she could. The decision ahead wasn't just business, it was personal. And for the first time, Zainab realized life had given her the sweetest form of justice. The day Zainab signed the papers, the room was buzzing with lawyers, investors, and flashing cameras. On the table in front of her sat a thick stack of documents, an $18 million deal that would officially transfer ownership of Halima's failing company to Corpe Solutions. With a steady hand, she picked up the pen, signed her name, and in that moment history turned. The girl once dismissed as not good enough, now owned the very company her sister had built and bragged about. It wasn't just business, it was the ultimate reversal. The underdog had become the owner. News spread like wildfire. Newspapers across Ghana and Nigeria ran bold headlines. From underdog to owner, Zainab acquires $18 million firm. Social media exploded with her story. People called her the face of resilience, the woman who turned pain into power. Everywhere she went, people whispered her name with admiration. Meanwhile, Zainab stayed calm, even humble. She wasn't chasing revenge. She was building her dream. Still, she couldn't ignore the sweetness of it all. The same family that once mocked her had to watch her rise higher than they ever imagined. That night, as she looked at the signed papers on her desk, Zainab allowed herself a small smile. This wasn't just a win in business. It was proof that the girl who once sat in silence, unheard and underestimated, had become the woman the world couldn't stop talking about. And this was only the beginning. The family dinner that night felt heavier than usual. The table was set with steaming plates, but no one seemed interested in the food. Everyone already knew the news. Zainab's deal had been on every channel, every newspaper, every phone screen. Still no one spoke. Her mother, usually quick to brag about Halima, sat stiff and silent. Halima herself kept her eyes low, her fork untouched. Finally, Zainab broke the silence. Her voice was calm, steady, carrying none of the bitterness she had swallowed for years. "All my life," she began, "you compared me. You said I'd never be as good, that Halima was the pride of this family." She looked straight at her mother, then at her sister, her words sharp but not shouted. "But now, I own everything you thought was hers." The room froze. Her mother's mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came out. For the first time, the woman who always had something to say had nothing at all. Halima's eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling as she stared at her plate. The weight of Zainab's words hung in the air like a storm that had finally broken. Zainab didn't gloat, didn't smile in triumph. She had carried this pain too long for cheap satisfaction. She simply stood, pushed her chair back, and walked away from the table. This time she didn't feel small. This time she left as the one who finally had the power. After that dinner, Zainab knew things could never return to the way they once were. For years she had chased her family's approval, hoping for a word of praise, a touch of pride, even a simple acknowledgement. But she finally understood. She didn't need it anymore. The endless comparisons, the silence during her victories, the mockery when she started her journey. Those were scars she could not ignore. So she set new boundaries. No more blind loyalty. No more giving all her love while receiving nothing in return. If her family wanted to remain in denial, that was their choice, but she would no longer beg for their acceptance. Zainab chose instead to focus on the people who had stood by her when no one else did. Her mentors, her colleagues, and the small team at Corpe who believed in her vision from the very beginning. They had become her real family. They celebrated her wins, encouraged her during failures, and shared her dream as if it were their own. To Zainab, that kind of loyalty meant more than blood ties ever could. Her company wasn't just a business anymore. It was a home, a place built on respect, trust, and shared purpose. And as she looked around at her team working late nights, laughing over small victories, and brainstorming bold ideas, Zainab felt whole. For the first time in her life, she wasn't chasing love. She was building it on her own terms with people who truly saw her. Late one evening, Zainab sat alone in her office, the city lights of Kumasi glowing outside her window. The journey behind her played like a film in her mind, the ignored certificates, the laughter at her dreams, the long nights of studying in silence, the failures that nearly broke her. Every scar, every insult, Every comparison had shaped her into the woman she was now. Without that pain, she might never have found her fire. She realized she had spent much of her life trying to prove her worth, not just to the world but to the people closest to her. And yet it was the rejection, the constant dismissal, that pushed her to build something no one could ignore. The hurt had been her teacher, the doubt had been her fuel. Now, sitting at the top of a company worth millions, she finally understood her story wasn't about revenge or competition. It was about becoming who she was meant to be. She smiled softly to herself, whispering the truth she had carried all along. I wasn't trying to be my sister. I was building to be myself. And that was more than enough.